So Tim is a senior partner at Sirdar Group. Now, Sirdar is a company that focuses specifically on working with growing businesses in helping them to understand the difference between these different roles that their leaders need to play, and setting up of independent boards, helping them to set up independent boards so that the corporate governance area is attended to well. Of course, Tim is got a bit of experience beyond that already. He's been with Sirdar for a while, but over 26 years in different capacities in the IT industry and so on, including on boards. So a lot of experience to apply in this space. Looking forward to hear what Tim has got to offer us today in explaining those three roles and the role of independent directors. But then to get very practical, we also have Wendy Simelana in the room with us as the second panelist. Apart from being a general manager at Extra Fleet Management, which sounds like a full-time job already, she's also serving as independent director on some small companies and will be sharing with us her practical experiences of that and what the benefits are and so on. She's also been involved in a previous life in Chevron and Shell and so on in different roles there. So some of those things that we can learn from corporate, we can also apply here, of course. Okay, so that's at the introductions. Any questions you can post to us in the Q&A, topic related, and we'll address those in our discussions. So the first bit is Tim and Wendy presenting to us the understanding of how things fit together in the world of the wearing the three hats, and then we will move forward from there to address maybe some practical questions that you may have. And we've got an hour to do so, and then plus a few minutes, 15 minutes or so for sharing IBASA news and opportunities. So how does that sound for a Wednesday morning going to lunchtime? I would get my pen and paper ready if I were you, because I've seen the slides that Tim is going to share, and there's a lot of useful information in there. Great, someone is chuckling. Tim, I'm not creating too much expectation. I know, you know, sort of. So, but before we do so, let's ask a question in the form of a poll, and the question there is: what portion of your small business clients fill these three roles, all three of them: owner, shareholder, director, governance leader, and manager implementer? So it doesn't matter if it's a P2I limited or a CC or a trust or even a cooperative, you know, sort of, they all have to fill these roles. And the question is, which portion of your businesses fill all of those roles, all three of those roles? So if you can, you'll see the screen popping up there. If you can't, I'm just kind of glancing at the screen here to see, you know, sort of if it pops up there for you. You can participate in the poll. There's some rapid voting here. It looks like most of us, about 68% to two-thirds of us, work with clients where everyone is. I'm going to close the poll soon. So if you still want to vote, do so quickly. And then I'm not sure how quick you are, Carl, with sharing that result, but let's end the poll. It's about two-thirds of us that are saying that most of our clients are, correction, two-thirds of us say that everyone is involved in all three of those roles, and then about 13% say about three-quarters of our clients, and 16% half. So it's only two of us that whose clients are less than half of them that are filling all three of those roles. So upcoming businesses, there to grow, but if they get some things right, maybe they can exceed what they expected in terms of their growth. And that is why we're tackling this topic. So Tim, most of us in the room have clients that are playing all three of those roles simultaneously. And I'm sure a lot of your clients do so too. So Tim is a good old hand at Zoom. So Tim, you have your slideshow set up and all of that. If I may ask you that, maybe we can first see you two, and then to activate your. So first, maybe let me ask you a question. Was my introduction accurate enough to set the stage for you, or did I miss something important that should be mentioned around what you are busy doing and your experience?
No, other than the Sirdar's been around for 10 years and our focus has been on private and family-held businesses. So this small, medium enterprise is exactly our space. We're definitely not focusing on the big corporates and listeds.
Yeah, no, great. So this issue of the three roles, the three hats that our clients need to wear. That's a topic that you cover quite a bit in your support to your small businesses too, your clients. So
Absolutely.
can you explain to us what is that all about? And maybe if you want to start by running into your presentation. I know you've got some nice slides to share with us too.
Can you see those now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is me, and if you want to make a note of my email address, by all means. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to grow good directors, or grow great directors, because we worked out that if you start from the board, then you can change not only the people in the organization's lives, but you can change the country and ultimately the continent. So that's been our focus. And the reason why there's lots of pictures of mountain climbing that will probably come up is because the name Sirdar comes from the lead Sherpa of a mountain expedition. So it's about picking how big a mountain you want to climb and then help support you to train the right people, get the right tools in place, and then lead you to the summit. So what we're talking about today is what game are you playing? So it's interesting that most of you are dealing with businesses and having the three hats of shareholder, director, and manager all in the same person or persons. So what I want to talk about just as a sort of framework is the concept of the business as a game, and there's two fundamentally different games that we play. So like golf or tennis or badminton is a single sport, and rugby and football might be a team sport. We're talking about craft versus an enterprise. And a craft is very much a game of golf. It's all about the individual, whereas an enterprise is very much about the team. So what my question to you as business advisors and as business people yourself is really make sure you understand what game are you playing and what game are your clients playing. Are they playing a game where the business is reliant on an individual, or are they playing a game where they've moved to the next level and the business is much more about a team? So what's the difference? Well, a craft is about the knowledge and expertise of the individual. So typically most businesses start in that way. Someone has a particular skill and ability and they decide to go into business, and that business is based on the service they deliver based on that craft and ability. So they become master craftsmen. And it's about utilizing your own knowledge and about utilizing your own knowledge in the business itself, and then sharing your knowledge with a team. So it's the typical master craftsman from Middle Ages and probably even before that was about the master craftsman, two craftsmen that supported them, a couple of apprentices and a lackey. And most small businesses look something like that. They have a leader who is the most expert in that particular service, and there are various people below them that are trying to aspire to become that good at that service. The problem with that is it's very much focused on the individual. So all you really own is a job. You don't own a business. You don't own something that you can sell very easily. And the fundamental difference in terms of advising crafts is because you can't sell the business, because it's not a particularly valuable asset in its own right, once you take the founder out of it, a craft business needs to operate according to particular game rules, which is earn as much as you can, save as much as you can in property or shares or whatever it might be, so that when you retire, you can use that asset stream for your income, because you may or may not be able to sell the business for anything much. So it's owning a job. Whereas an enterprise is very different. And this is where we shift from the common language in English where we say, I own my own business. If it's truly a business, you cannot own it because it is an independent juristic person. So it would be slavery if you owned it. So in terms of our language, we're putting ourselves in a position where we're not driving the right outcomes, the right thinking, because we think of this business as something that we own. It's our business, it's my business. I do what I want to like, what I like. I have authority, I have control. whereas a true business is about a team. So you can't own a business just like you can't own a human being. And that's where an enterprise comes in. So when you're looking at someone's business, and your own for that sake, that matter, the first question is to ask, is the business able to operate without the immediate involvement of the founder on a day-to-day basis? And if it cannot operate without that immediate involvement, then you are talking about a craft. If it can, then you've made that shift and you're now starting to move towards being more of an enterprise. And the second step is the enterprise must have a significant value in its own right. You must be able to sell it for a good multiple of profit. It must be able to be part of your wealth planning, part of your future, part of your legacy. And if you die or if you retire, then you've got something to sell. So it's what are the fundamental differences? It's nothing to do with you. It's all about the team. So if we take out an individual, we can replace them with another individual and the business will continue. It's about building a system. So the game rules are different. An enterprise is separate and distinct. And what is fundamentally different is a craft does not really need shareholders, directors, and managers because they're all the same people. So there's no split of roles, that everyone's doing the same thing. Whereas if you want to truly set up an enterprise, you need to clearly understand what is the role of a shareholder, what is the role of a director, and what is the role of a manager, because they're different. So that's what we're going to get into today. So that was really just to sort of set the framework so you have a clear understanding of there is a distinct difference between a business which is set up like a craft and a business that's set up like an enterprise. And that can happen on day one. What we're struggling with is when we come across businesses 20, 30 years later that have been set up like a craft and they say, well, I want to retire, I want to sell the business, I want to do something different. And they can't, because they can't extricate themselves from this thing because it's entirely dependent on them. So 3 hats. So shareholders. What is distinct and different about shareholders? Well, shareholders have a vote. Shareholders have different number of shares, possibly. And they're in there for a very specific reason, which I'll touch on in a minute. Directors are a team. So you should have more than one. Otherwise, you can't run a board effectively if you only got one. But it's a team of equals. So shareholders have a vote, and the votes may be different power, different number of shares that they can vote with. Whereas a board is 1 vote each. You are equal in that room. Management is a hierarchy. So you have someone at the top and then the rest of the team are spread out below. And it might be a flat hierarchy or it may be a steep hierarchy, depends on the organization. But ultimately you need someone to lead the organization. There is also a very hard line between a shareholder and the directors, which is often where things start going horribly wrong. Because as a shareholder, you have very specific rights. Your rights are to a return on your investment and to growth on your investment. And you have the power to appoint or remove directors. Ideally nominate directors, but in a lot of shareholder agreements, it's very much about appointing directors. That's it. You cannot get involved in the strategy. You cannot get involved in meddling with the operations. That is not your right or your role as a shareholder. The line between directors and management is much more porous because you've got information flow going backwards and forwards on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Whereas shareholder information should be ideally once or twice a year. And you're submitting a report to shareholders to demonstrate how you are delivering on their requirements, on their shareholder statement of intent. And one key aspect of management, which I just want to mention here because it's all too common misunderstanding, it doesn't work effectively if you have multiple MDs and multiple CEOs. Pick one. Take it in turns every other year if you want to, but pick one. Because otherwise the board doesn't have the ability to hold an individual accountable for the operations of the business. So then whose fault is it? You end up with a blame game backwards and forwards. We need one person who is responsible to reporting to the board and one person who's responsible to take action based on what happens in the boardroom. So all of those parties are related to the company, but their relationships are very different. The relationship between the company and a shareholder is entirely selfish, because a shareholder is expecting a return. They're expecting something from the company. Yes, they've put money into the company, but it's typically a once-off, or it's something that's doesn't happen frequently, and ideally shouldn't happen frequently. You need to fund the money for the next period, and that's it. So you're expecting a return. It's a selfish return. Being on a board is completely different. You are completely unselfish. You are giving to the company unselfishly. You expect a return, but it's a return in terms of a fixed director's fee, which may even be zero. So the return is minimal, potentially, but you are giving selflessly to that company and in the best interests of that company. So everything you do is in the best interest of the company, not yourself. The complication when you get down to the management level is that you have both. You have a selfless relationship and you have a selfish relationship because you have a contract. So if you are holding a role in an organization, you have a contract to deliver that role. And depending on what the role is, you may have to work overtime, you have to work weekends, you may have to go and put in extra effort. In other words, you have to act selflessly and to fulfill the role. But the selfish aspect is that you get paid for it. You get paid a salary. And where the selfishness really shows its head is when you can't pay the salary, or when the person thinks they're not getting enough of a salary, then the selfish act kicks in big time. And we've seen it in companies we've been working with. Pay was late, people just down tools. So looking at that diagram, if you can picture that diagram and remember that diagram, if you're wearing all three of those hats, it's really, really difficult to manage those three different types of relationships. So the way to break it up is to bring in independent directors at board level, because what happens is the conversation falls to the lowest common denominator. So if everybody in the boardroom is a manager, the conversation ends up being almost entirely operational. If the conversation, if there's an argument, it rises to the higher level of commonality, which if you're all shareholders means, yes, but I'm the majority shareholder, therefore what I say goes. As soon as you bring independence into the board meeting, then you hold that conversation at a director level. It's much easier to stop it rising to a shareholder conversation or dropping to an operational conversation, because as an independent director, and particularly as an independent chairman, I have no other reason for being there than being the director. So I'm not going to have a conversation about the operations because it's not my role. I'm not going to have a conversation at the shareholder level because it's not my role. And I'm not going to get a return on the investment based dividends, etc. So there's a line and there's a gap, and there should not be anything crossing that gap between shareholder and manager, whereas the director portion holds the conversation between the two. So the shareholders are investing for a return. And often as shareholders in our own businesses, particularly, we don't have even considered what our return on investment is. So it's important to work out how much money did you put in, how much salary have you forgone, etc., because then you can really understand whether it was a good idea to invest in this business, or whether you should actually think about investing in something else or diversifying your investments. Director champions the promise. So what is the promise of the business? And the directors help drive that into the marketplace. And the manager brings that promise to life. They do the doing. So a good analogy is if you think about a ship going to sea, the shareholders buy the ship, they define the sort of key role of the ship. What type of ship is it? Is it passenger? Is it cargo? But from the moment it leaves port, they have absolutely no control. They've made their investment, they expect to get a return once it returns to port, but that's it. The directors run the ship, the strategy, they take into consideration the conditions, etc., the capabilities of that ship during the course of the journey, decide where we're going to go, where we're going to get best return for our investment, or not investment, best return for our service or whatever it is we're delivering. And then the managers, they do the rowing, adjust the sails, whatever it might be, to make sure the ship gets there. But the key point is, once the ship leaves harbour, as a shareholder, you cannot influence it. Whereas it's all too easy, if it's a family business particularly, to get our hands in there. And where that becomes a big problem is the legal recourse. Because if the shareholder insists on being part and parcel of it, as, thank you, Tabi, once the shareholder is not clearly acting as only a shareholder, then they risk being wrapped up in any kind of legal suit that happens to the company. Whereas if they can clearly demonstrate that they've only held the role of shareholder, then those assets are safe. As a, that hard line applies. So it's really important, particularly when you think you've got an investment in a company that, or big investment, big pot of investments in a trust or something, the shares of the business are held in that trust. It's really, really important to make sure that that trust is not seen to be meddling in the operations of the business at all. Otherwise, all of those assets become open and available for anyone to take if they so wish in a legal case. So very quickly, just to wrap up, the different types of directors. So be aware that there is a distinct difference between executive and non-executive, and most importantly, between independent and non-exec. And we would advise, and King advises, that you have a chairman that's independent, non-exec, you have at least one more director that's independent, and that the majority of the directors are non-executive. So if you take, for example, a board of 5, you have 2 execs, one is the MD, one is whoever makes the decisions in terms of finance, and then you have 3 non-execs, of whom the majority are independent. So you'd have 2 independents and 1 other non-executive. And the closing statement, so a high performance director is one who's obsessed with creating meaningful economic impact through their role on the board and the role the company plays in the economy. Such director is not afraid to have the tough conversations as well as do the mundane aspects that together enable board success. It's care, skill, and diligence that they need to demonstrate. And a high performance board is one that through its rhythm, decision-making holds the company accountable to a performance standard higher than it's ever had before. That's why it's so key that the managing director is a single person so that the board can hold them accountable. Okay, anything else? Any questions, any comments, any feedback for you, Christoph?
The questions are starting to come in. I think you've partly answered Tabi's question already, but there's maybe a deeper level to that, and I see Goni has also added a question. So, by the way, there's one winner at the end of this webinar that will get access at a very special offer from Sirdar to their next director training program. And the award of that winner will be based on the pointed and interesting questions that are being posted. So there's a good incentive for you to actually post a question that is meaningful. So we've got two names in that already for that, winning that prize. Add your question there, I'm sure. I mean, thank you very much, Tim. I mean, this is clearly, you need a whole program to kind of go into the depth that's necessary for this theme. And what you gave us is a real concise summary of the separation of those roles. Perhaps for ourselves too, sort of because we've got our own businesses, but definitely so for our clients, where we can see how they get so bogged down in running around trying to fill the different roles. And I see that, by the way, there all the questions are starting to run, so people are very keen on that prize. And in separating those roles, so apart from the legal, sort of how we can then support our clients in understanding this too. So perhaps before you let you off the hook, Tim, if you can maybe just reflect on that. So when you engage with a typical small business client where all 3 of those roles are collapsed into a single person, my experience, I'm sure a lot of other business advisors on the webinar here today would also attest to that, is that there may be an initial level of resistance. How do you overcome that resistance that a person makes, maybe based on fear or uncertainty or whatever the reason is for them to show some resistance? How do you address that resistance? And I think, Wendy, maybe it's something that you can reflect on later too. But Tim, let's start off with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's very real, particularly if someone's start to build a successful business. So they believe they need to be in control for the business to succeed. They have got their personality is fundamentally linked to that business. So that conversation about this is my business, their entire being is related to the success of that business. Their success in life is directly linked to that success in that business. So what typically happens is there's some kind of change in thinking, and that might be from a shock where they've become sick and they realize, whoa, what's going to happen to the business if I can't continue? They may have happened some kind of change in their value system because they've now had children and they want to spend more time with their children. But it's usually something that triggers a change in that ego. So ego is a massive problem, and changes the way that they think about their role in the business. And that's usually some kind of either internal self-development process or some kind of external shock. So we would typically try and offer them a choice of say, well, this is where your business needs to go if you want to be it. If you want to run a craft, this is what it needs to look like. And then they can make a choice. Or, well, actually, I do want a choice later down the line where I can just be a shareholder, or I can focus on sales or research and development. I don't want to run the business anymore. Therefore, I need to set it up more like an enterprise. So it's usually talking about the choices. And then once they've made the choice, helping and supporting them to do the best possible job they can in that choice. So being the best craftsperson is a choice. And now, how do you upskill yourself? How do you make sure you're leveraging your time effectively? What service providers can you use to free up the things I don't do particularly well myself? And all of those things come into play. And then from a wealth planning perspective, so we'll make sure you've got a portion of your income that's going straight to an investment. It's automated. You can't touch it. All of those kind of things. So they save themselves from disaster.
Yeah.
Because if there's a problem with them, it's gone. It's done, finished.
Yeah. Sounds very logical when you explain it like that. I'm sure practically it takes more.
Practically it takes years or it takes months. It depends on the individual. It really does.
Yeah. But thanks for sharing that. It's that experience I think that we can apply in our own working with our own clients too. So Wendy, if I can bring you in. By the way, I've launched another poll there around serving as an independent director. Now, Wendy is serving as an independent director, so that's something that Tim spoke about. Sort of is that the introduction of a board is one step, but the actual real meaning is achieved when you start introducing independent directors onto that board, and when they become the majority on that board for the business to then achieve the potential that it could. So the poll is about your ability to perhaps become an independent director. Now, it is something that we clearly would need to talk about. Sort of business advisor is not a director, and director is not a business advisor. And can the two coexist? Sort of can you play two roles? Those are the kind of questions that I suppose would come up immediately. But the question here is, do you reckon that there are some of your clients or those similar to those that you're already serving, businesses similar to those that you're already serving, that you could serve as independent director for? So there's quite a few options there. Yes, I can make a career shift, which means that you actually abolish being a business advisor and become a professional independent director. Yes, number two, yes, I can serve as advisor for some and as director for others. Or yes, number three, yes, but I am not sure how it will work out for me. Or then no, I'm suitable to serve as advisor, mentor, coach, or trainer like I am now, and not as a director. Or no, I could, but the legal liabilities scare me off a bit. Sort of. So there's something to think about too. Or no, I don't think the market is ready. Sort of. It may be in theory the right thing to do, but people won't respond to it nice. Or lastly, no, I'm unsure about the requirements for serving as an independent director. So vote on any of those. If it's suitable for you, yes or no, and based on what conditions. And then we're going to close the poll right now. So it looks like about half of us are saying, yes, we can serve as advisor for some and as director for others. So that is perhaps the key question, Wendy, that we can also address, sort of when you talk about your experience, whether it's possible to serve as an independent director in one context and as an advisor or a manager in another. I think you are a living example of perhaps that. So maybe you can reflect with us on the practicalities of serving as independent director and combining those different roles. So you've been doing it for a while. How long have you been serving as independent director, Wendy?
So this is my 4th year now.
Okay, so you've started off perhaps not knowing what it was about, and then learning the ropes, and over time becoming one of Sirdar Group's star independent directors, or not?
Tim, what do you think? So, I mean, I think in terms of, when I started getting into board directorship as an exec for a large corporate. And then what I actually used to do is actually volunteer to serve in non-profit organizations or even smaller organizations. And that's where you really get to understand, or where I really got the understanding of being an independent director and the importance. And I think to answer your question, around the poll, I think it is very important that we separate the two. If you're a business advisor, be a business advisor, serve your specific purpose in terms of your contribution to the company. But if also you're looking at being an independent director, that also needs to be separate. The roles are critical to know and learn what the differences are. There tends to be some conflict of interest when you wear two hats at the same time. So in terms of that as well, so we have to remember the core function of an independent director. It's actually just two main roles. One of which is that you need to make sure that you challenge and you contribute towards the development of your strategy. So this is what we call the North Star. So nothing happens if the buildings were to fall down, if people were just to walk out. What is that one single picture you want your organization to maintain in good and in bad times? That is your North Star that you need to support in getting crafted. And then from there, you then need to make sure that you're scrutinizing the performance of the managers to make sure that that is aligned with the North Star. And in that comes needing to understand the business. You have to make it your business to know what your business is doing or what the company you're serving is doing. So it's not just about, a fancy title, you're an independent director, you sit at the top and everything is top level. Things can only be top level when you have a very good understanding of what happens so you can influence the growth and the strategy. So in essence, you really are the custodians of governance. It's critical that you demonstrate that you are judging the business in good faith and with a proper purpose. I'm trying to, get some extra cash on the side, so I'll serve on this board. And why it actually cannot be that as well is because not only do you have the responsibility to make the company successful, but also the legal liability that lies on you as an individual is one that you need to be mindful of. The fiduciary duties as well, critical. When anything bad happens, and when I'm sure we've seen governance issues play out in our country, and all of that points to the directors. And then as an independent director, that's one of the things you need to be mindful of. And your participation needs to have the external environment in mind at all times. I think also I want to touch on some of the mistakes that as an independent director you make. As I mentioned earlier, you see it as an opportunity to make extra money. You go and you sit in a corner, they serve you nice lunch, and you just listen, you nod at everything, you're not contributing. That is a big no-no. You need to understand, if you are not saying anything and anything goes wrong, the liability falls on you. And also it's important to not get involved in the politics. You're not and by politics, I mean the company politics. You're not in that board to befriend or to form some coalition of some sort with the rest of the board members. No, you are there, as I mentioned, with the view to act in good faith, to make sure that the business strategy is being carried out. And also another thing that I found has been, a pitfall, can be a mistake, is not taking the time to learn about the business that you're involved in. So once you get appointed, or when you do start, get one of the MDs to set you up with either the COO or somebody in operations, so you can know what happens in there. And then you are able to obviously give advice in terms of how improvements can be made. As an independent director, in terms of the value that we bring to the business, your responsibility is to challenge the status quo. Don't get tired of asking why. It is in that why that most problems are solved. It is in that why that you also start to see your business differently. This is in essence an extra pair of eyes that's not emotionally invested like you would be if you are a shareholder or an operations manager. It serves a good purpose as well in that you're an objective party and you're not directly involved. So what you say is purely based on, as I say, your good interest. Most of the time, it is based on what is happening on the outside. So you look at the macro level, what is happening externally. You look at the meso level, what is happening internally, what is our the industry doing, and you're able then to contribute in terms of saying, on the micro level, this is how I think we need to shape and direct the business going forward. I think for the small businesses, it is also important to know and also allow yourself time to say, you know what, maybe at this stage of the business, it's time for me to step away and allow a board to take over, because that is what takes businesses to the next level. So often, Tim touched on it, it's the egos that get in the way. It's I built this, this is my baby. You start having those types of conversations in terms of saying, I'm not going to let go of this, it's mine. I've had this for many years. However, the fact that, as a manager, as a shareholder, you've had this for many years, essentially means that you've got blind spots that an independent director could actually come in and support you in highlighting and moving the business to the next level. As an independent director as well, and being a member of the board, we also have the responsibility to talk about what is working in the structures and reappoint where necessary. So the appointment of the CEO has to be the responsibility of the board and not the shareholders. And it is imperative as well to have a conversation with the shareholders around you being a representative of theirs. And so they cannot be you or you cannot be them. And so each one needs to make sure that the roles and responsibilities are cleared out and very well respected. And if you see what happens in most cases as well is that you'll find the executive director, the CEO, the COO, and the CFO, they will speak the same language. They will agree on the same things. Of course, because they're internal, they know. But your responsibility is then to scrutinize those in terms of saying, how are you differentiating between this, and how can you see value through bringing in an external perspective? And also asking questions based on, we've got corporate governance. Corporate 3 is out. It's actually on corporate, King 4 now is out. You need to know those rules and regulations, like that needs to be your Bible. Because when you walk in there, you are there to ensure that corporate governance is being complied to. I think in terms of that I would say are like the most practical and most critical. And if as a business advisor you're sitting here, you're wondering, how can I get involved in becoming an independent director? Go out there. There are lots of NPOs, NGOs, smaller organizations that would actually appreciate you volunteering your services. And also before you do that, I would also say it is important to go in there having the right knowledge and the right training. So, there is programs such like the one Tim is going to speak about, so the Sirdar Director Program. Those are their methodologies of how to be a director. It highlights the roles, it highlights the responsibilities, who's supposed to do what. But when you go in there as well as an independent director, you're not then taken in and then you're consumed by the environment and then you lose the essence of what it is that you're supposed to be doing in the first place. I think that's really pretty much what I can share from a practical point of view.
No, I mean, that's really useful, specifically that you say it's not that difficult to serve as an independent director. It's a matter of volunteering for NGOs and starting to sharpen your tools as a director, and then perhaps look around where that support and training is available for us to get and improve our skills. So thanks for that, Wendy. I think, Carl, just remember that you've got the spotlight view on. So we're still seeing, I know Wendy is much better to look at than me, but maybe we can go back to the normal view. I see there's quite a few. Rick, Edmund, Daphne, Nishi, everyone, sort of have been sharing questions. We'll try our best to address most of those questions. I am going to ask Wendy, Tim, and we also have Carl, the producer, and Andre, the IBASA MD in the room. If you can each identify from those one question, and then we can see if we can address the others. I would like to start off with a question, and maybe it's directed to both of you, Tim and Wendy. The balance in a board. So I think it was Terence and Nishi asked about the kind of skills and contributions you need in a board. What is it that one needs to look at in terms of getting that balance, and what kind of requirements are there for independent director? So I'm not sure, Wendy, maybe you want to go first?
Sure. So in terms of the skills, you obviously have to have executive management experience. And by that, I mean, you need to have been a business leader in whatever industry. Because pretty much at that level, the kind of work that you do becomes standard, if I can put it like that. So you do have to have experience of being in leadership, of being in executive management. If you don't, like I say, in your current day-to-day, if you are employed like I am, so from time to time, I go and I sit in the board of my current company, not as a serving board member, but as an observer. So you start to increase your skill sets in that way. And as I mentioned, training, there is trainings that are there. There's actually qualifications that are registered with the National Qualifications Framework, that you can actually go out there and obtain an official certificate that can give you then that knowledge.
Great. So Tim, I mean, this is a pointed question because I know you've got a whole system that you'd explained this at, and I see that in Wendy's presentation you had that compass up. So perhaps you can just explain that quickly, sort of in composing a balanced board, sort of what are the things to look out for?
So we look at the three main areas. So it's just like recruiting a person to an executive position, really. What is their personality profile? So how do they think? What's their preference in terms of the questions they ask? Then what is their aptitude? So are they in alignment with the company's values? So if there's a mismatch there, then you're also underwriting to nothing because they're supposed to be putting the business first. And then what is their specific skill set? So we do an assessment of the business to work out at a board level what is missing in terms of specific skills, and then what is missing from profile perspective in the boardroom. So what happens is if you have too many people that have what we call an activating energy, you develop too many new ideas, you never implement them. If you have too many people of a sustaining energy, they don't want to change anything. So it doesn't matter how many new ideas you throw at that team, they're not going to change and develop something new. And on the other side, you've got an energy which is about people energy, and the other side is about data. So if you've got a majority is the people energy, they're going to talk about the people and what the people are doing, but they're not going to look at what the results are reflecting. So usually highlighted by the fact they don't have proper financial reports, for example. So if you don't have a balance of all of four of those energies represented in the room, you make bad decisions, and you make decisions in a consistent direction. So the business becomes more and more people focused, or more and more data focused, or more and more internally focused on what do we already do, or you're just coming up with so many new ideas that the business just burns up and dies because it's growing too fast and people can't keep up. So that's how we do it. So it's what is the skill that's missing? do you absolutely need someone who really understands the strategy of marketing or strategy of HR, or is really clued up on the risk aspects because there's no one on the board who's looking for those kind of things? Or someone who's very good at understanding how systems work and making sure that policies and procedures and computer systems are up to scratch and following the strategic path that the company wants to come to follow. And then, as I said, must have the same values as the organization. And then what questions they ask, what is their personality contributing to that room? Yeah,
great. Thanks for sharing. Yes, Wendy?
I just wanted to add as well that I'm seeing a question, somebody asking, how do you, the selection process. There are specific programs that do these personality profiles. And so that's what Tim is in essence referring to.
Yeah, so we use one called Contribution Compass. There's Wealth Dynamics. There's a whole host of other ones, DISCI, et cetera, et cetera. So it's whatever your organization decides to use it consistently.
Great. So I've asked Andre and Carl and the two of you, Wendy and Tim, to identify a question that each of you would like us to address. So I'm not sure, Andre, if I can bring you in, is there a question that your eye fell on that you would like us to address, or combination perhaps of a few? In those that I've read, I see that you can actually combine a few of them together. Just unmute. Make sure you unmute yourself first. Well, I'll do it for you.
Okay. I like the second one as well, the high performance director, but I think the one, how can you identify an appropriate hat, especially if you operate a small business? I think that's very, very appropriate for the smaller organizations. And I think in many cases perhaps you don't really know where you step across the line from one position to the next. So perhaps you can look at that one for me, please, Christoph.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, Wendy and Tim, if you want to tackle that, sort of when you work with a client sometimes they're more suitable to serve on a board than they are to be a manager, perhaps, how do you help them in navigating through that? Especially considering the conditions in small businesses where the resources are scarce, so it's not as if they can just add more and more people.
I think it's going through and helping people understand what the different roles are. And it's not to say you can't hold all of them, but you need to understand when you're holding which. So with your shareholder hat on, I've put money and time into this business. Now, am I getting a return? Have I ever actually quantified what my return is? And it's not the salary portion. You need to move towards the point where you're paying yourself a market-related salary, but what else is the business providing for you? Are you paying yourself a dividend or something along those lines? So obviously, first step is to make a profit. Second step is to make sure you're paying yourself a market-related salary. But then once you've got to the point where the business is actually generating proper revenue, proper profits, are you paying yourself as a shareholder? How are you going to get your investment back? How have you structured that in investment into the business? Is it a loan account? Did you just put it in as equity? How do you reflect that, and how do you measure it? And then as a director, well, actually, am I a strategic thinker? I can understand how my product and service works, but do I think strategically enough to take this business to the next level? So that's that whole conversation about whether you carry on as a craftsman or whether you move into the enterprise space. And there's a misnomer, I think, saying Nikita for asking that question. You don't necessarily have to pay directors anything. There's quite a few people who want to get the experience of being a director, and they're happy to do it for nothing for at least a period. Maybe not forever, but they'll do it for a year maybe to get their experience and also to give back. So there's plenty of retired people, experienced business people who just want to share their knowledge with somebody. And if necessary, they'll join the board of a startup and contribute. So it doesn't have to cost you much at all.
Yeah.
And then manager, are you the right person to manage the business? And we've got plenty of clients who've realized that they're the worst person to be the MD and have changed to becoming head of sales or head of research and development or whatever their passion is, and brought in a professional managing director to run the business.
Yeah, indeed. So, Wendy, do you want to add something there, or can we step on to the next question? Or maybe there's a question that your eye fell on that you would like to address, Wendy.
Yes, it's a combination. So there's someone who's asking if what is the best performing kind of director? Would it be a previous business owner or a professional? It can be a combination of both. That is why these profiling, programs that the various consultant companies have, you need to do that profile, understand where you want to take your business, and then from there, the advisors will then tell you in terms of the profile which types of individuals you require, and based on that you get them. The value in bringing in entrepreneurship business owners, because of that, sort of creative thinking, critical thinking, very flexible in thought, but also there is value in having a professional team, somebody who is, a CA, an attorney, or you name them, who brings in their methodologies, as well as make sure that from a compliance point of view, there's that in that board.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm sorry, guys, but we're fast running out of time. So maybe, Carol, if you've identified a question, I see Gloria's had a hand up. So Gloria, I'm actually going to bring you into the room too, if you don't mind. You may reject coming into the room if you want to, but you can ask that. Today we've got one live question, and I see Daphne too. So we're going to have two live questions in the room if you would like to come in. But in the meantime, Carol, if you can quickly pose your question. Carol, if you're not there.
Hi, thank you, Christoph. I think I see a question from Nishi, I think, which is something that might keep a few people away from being directors. Nishi ask, as directors, are you held jointly liable for problems faced? If so, how do you work around that? I think that might be something that scares people off because they don't understand how the risks is working for directors.
Okay, maybe I can start it off. So, as a director, as I mentioned, you are liable for what goes on in there. So any legal issues or public issues, as a director, you're the person that is liable. And in some companies, the companies that I've also had exposure to, they have what is called, especially if there's financial liability, there is what is called director insurance that gets put into place, and there's values there as well as the contributions in terms of how much you want your directors to be covered, and as well as a director yourself, you can actually go and get that. You protect yourself in the event of those financial misfortunes.
Yeah, indeed. So there are lots of tax and liability issues to deal with, but if you do it well, of course, that can be managed. So Gloria, you look to be sorry, Daphne, we can't unmute you, it seems. Gloria, we can't put on your video, but you can ask your question live, and that will be the last question then. So Gloria, what was your question? You can speak. Okay, this is the risk we take, of course, of bringing people or aiming to bring people in live. You've put up your hand, and we've taken that as you want to say something. So this is your last chance, Gloria. Okay, shall we conclude then with that? Except if there's Tim or Wendy, if there's a last question that you quickly want to do. Tim, we still need to give you time to talk about your program and also the winners. So by the way, the good news is that everyone that's attending get a nice discount there on the next director training program offered by Sirdar. And there's one lucky winner that asked the most pointed question in Tim's opinion, that even get a bigger discount, I'll give you a last chance, Gloria. No, you're not there. Okay, so let's move on to, except Tim and Wendy, if there's a question that you still want to quickly cover. I'll give you a chance just now to wrap up a final thought.
Yeah, I think for me, the most pointed question is the one from Rick Ed, because it actually covers everything that all of us are struggling with. That the concept of separation of roles is totally foreign to most of my clients. They're not interested in considering the concept. It's the biggest single barrier to moving a business forward is that they don't believe they need to change. So my advice would be that if you can't have a conversation with the majority shareholder to talk about what their path looks like for this business and how they're going to get there doing what they're doing, and maybe throw in a few risks of, well, what about if this happens? What about if that happens? To try and change their thinking that they can't do this on their own. If they do, they're lucky. It's not a given. We've got one client in Kenya where in 2 separate car accidents, they lost the entire leadership team in the family, and they're left with an aunt and 2 sons to run a multinational, massively profitable and huge revenues, billions of dollars business. They've sent those sons and any other executive manager they can find who's interested onto a training course on how to be a director. Because if they don't get that right, and they don't get that right soon, they're not going to have a business left. It's just going to start slowly falling apart. So this stuff does happen. But it may not have happened to your friend. It may not have happened to your uncle. You may not have direct experience of it happening, but it does happen. So what is the legacy that that shareholder wants to leave? Do they want to leave something for the kids? Do they want to have something that they can live off the income from? Why did they do this thing? They did this thing because they wanted to be an amazing, whatever it might be. And they have a business that is international. Whatever it is, you need to get back and focus on that thing that got them going and that thing that's driving them forward. And then throw scenarios in. Well, what would happen if you had a bit more time? If you didn't have to be the managing director because there was someone just as capable as you, in fact, better than you, doing the job, how would that feel? How would that be different? And if they can't see it and they can't shift, then you just have to leave them to it until the universe whacks them around the head and says, now think about this again. And it may take a couple of years. So we've had companies where they've been on our newsletter since 2010, 2011, 2012, and suddenly they're phoning and saying, I'm ready now. What do I have to do?
Yeah. Yeah. So Tim, Carl's put on the screen there, sort of in terms of what to do if you want to apply for your director program. So maybe before we get to you, Wendy, Tim, while you're speaking, can you just frame that for us quickly and before we start wrap up?
Yeah, just to say I've changed the bit.ly code to make it unique to you guys, so we don't have to work out whether you were on the program or not, because no one else will have access to that bit.ly link. So there's ADP IBASA is the link. So if you go to ADP IBASA, it'll take you to a contact page where we just ask you a couple of questions about what you're interested in doing, and then we'll follow up from there. So it doesn't commit you to anything, it's just an expression of interest. And then at least we know that you came from this webinar. We don't have to try and work it out.
So can we ask you that you just type it there into the chat area? The correct, it's bit.ly, bit.ly / and then ADP. Okay. And then is it correct that you've identified Rick's question as the most pointed one, so he's got a special additional discount?
He has got a special additional discount, so thank you, Rick. I think mainly it's not so much as the most pointed, but it's probably the most difficult question to answer, and it's the most difficult problem we have with any people we can, or companies we can see desperately need to do something differently. But it's just the whole concept is so foreign to them that you've got to go on a slowly learning journey with them to drip feed, the potential risks, the potential this, potential that, until finally they go, okay, I get it.
Great. We were really ambitious in allocating an hour for this topic. I know. So there may be more questions than answers right now. But guys, sorry for those whose questions we didn't get to. I'll just ask in one sentence, sort of very quickly, our guests, Tim and Wendy. By the way, thank you very much for this really rich and thought-provoking and idea-generating webinar that we could have here today. I gained a lot. I'm sure all of us on the room. By the way, we were about over 70 people in the room at one point in time. So can I just ask for a last quick comment, sort of what is it that you take away, or a tip or a pointer that you would give business advisors in terms of this topic? So Tim, can we start with you, and then Wendy? And then Andre, if I may ask you to do the same, sort of from what you've gained, sort of just to share with the community. That would lead us into talking about IBASA and so on. So let's keep it with Tim, Wendy, Andre.
So I'd say if you truly want to consider the career of being a director, then upskill yourselves and then practice it. So get onto any board you possibly can. It could be your local body corporate, it could be your local football club, anything, to get some experience of what works on a board and what absolutely doesn't. And then get training. So whether it's institute directors, our courses, other programs that are available, get some training. It's like starting a completely new career, and then network like crazy. Because the only way you're going to find roles is you can't, yes, you can join the institute directors database, you can join our database, but we're not going to give you a role. It's going to be like any other recruitment process. So network like crazy if you really, really want to do this.
Great.
And it is like starting a completely new career.
Yeah. Thanks. Big opportunity. And Wendy?
I think on my side, it's just when you do become, an independent director, you get into a directorship role, ethics. You do things right the first time. You never have to look back. You never have to worry. You can have a sleepless night and a successful business. And I think for me, that's number one. Ethics and compliance. Make sure that you are following the rules and make sure that you're not breaking laws. Even when no one is watching, do the right thing. That's what will make us of the role and the company that you'll be serving.
Great stuff. So, Andre, we've saved the last word for you before we go on to talking about IBASA. And by the way, don't go away if you're not an IBASA member yet, because Andre's got some special announcements to make. But in terms of our topic here today, Andre, what do you take away?
Yeah, Christoph, it sounded all great. And I just highlighted some of the key words for me. If you mess it up, there are legal issues. If you really want to be a good director, be obsessed, be knowledgeable, bear everything in mind, act in good faith, ethics. Those are the key things that I think that I would love to take away today.
Great. Yeah, cool. So, as I said, sorry for those questions that we couldn't get to. Not that they were worthless, but we are already 7 minutes over our allocated time.
Christoph,
so again,
is there an opportunity for us to for you to take copies of those?
Yeah, we can share them. We can share the questions. If you, I'm not sure what it is you're thinking of, Tim, but if there's a way to actually answer those questions for people, maybe we can do that. Yeah. Not making a commitment, but if it's possible, we can look into that. Yeah. So if you've posted a question, we've got your email address. We can email you back on the question. So
I was thinking sort of more of a take the sort of general themes that are covered in all those questions, and then answer those, and then email that to everybody.
We can definitely do that. So as I say, I'm scared to make a commitment that we may not be able to meet, but if it's possible, we'll do so.
Great.
So with your help, of course, Tim and me. we facilitators. We're not experts. So. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. So stay with us. There's some IBASA news and some benefits that you may gain by just staying on a few more minutes. So Tim and Winnie, welcome to stay on. If you have to run, we'll understand that too. But Andre, if I can hand over to you, sort of IBASA is our organization. We're the members, or some of us in the room. By the way, thank you very much, IBASA, if I'm not a member, because you got so much value for nothing. Maybe time to join. Or not so, Andre?
I think so, Christoph. I think, especially after today's talk again, the word that stood out for me was obsessed, and I think that's how we feel at IBASA. We are obsessed about growing our business advisors in the country, and the prize that I want to give away today is not a prize. It is literally a discount for the first 5 people, 25% discount, who wants to join today or this week. But it is really to understand, where do I stand? How can I grow? How can I be the best business advisor in the country? Perhaps not in the country. I always believe the globe is small. We want to take it much, much wider. From where we are today, I must say that the team are excellent. with me. It's not individual work. It's all about teamwork at IBASA. And we want to grow. We want to grow people at the end of the day. I'm very glad to say that we made good progress with our competency framework. That is about, when I say ready, yes, we're at the stage for just final sign-off from our board, and then we can move forward to get that in place. We are looking at things like the qualifications already. How can we really teach or grow our business advisors? How can we take them through a career rather than just a once-off? For today, if you look at the application process, it's very simple. Just go onto our website, select, or under membership, there's a drop-down menu, select the download application form, complete the form, and return. So they are very, very simple, and that is what I would encourage those who don't know or are not members of IBASA. If you could do that today, it would be great. It's for your own benefit. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. So, by the way, if we can make use of the opportunity, we do have a few more minutes, just a few. So, if there are any members signed in now that would like to ask a question that Andre may be able to address, he spoke about the competencies framework. I'm really keen to hear what's happening there, and not just that it's making progress, but what it's actually saying. So maybe we can organize a webinar specifically on that going into the future soon. But what is that about, Andre? Because maybe if I'm new to the community, I don't even know what this thing is called, this competency framework. What is this about?
What I did was I looked at absolutely the best practices for who am I as a business advisor? Where do I fit in? So there are 3 layers within the competency framework that we would like to understand much better or measure our members against. So we identified about 200 plus competencies, and it will be easy to understand where do I fit in, what competencies do I have, what do I need, and that's basically the backbone of the competency framework. Okay, that will also give you, and of course, that will give you a good idea of how do I grow as a business advisor. So it's not only where I am, but where do I want to go to.
Yeah. No, great stuff. Looking forward to that, and for that to be finalized so that we can all share in creating our own competencies as supporters of entrepreneurs. And that's a big job, by the way, because everyone speaks about small business now with the elections coming to, sort of small business as the driver of job creation, economic growth. And isn't it our job to make sure that they live up to that? So it's a big ask, and we better improve our ability to deliver on that too, as the professional servicing them. So this webinar is just one part of it. Hopefully, we're all engaged in different ways in doing more in empowering ourselves. That is definitely, as a professional body, what IBASA I know stands for as a member of that body. I would really recommend that if you're not a member yet, you actually join. It is a community of people that are creating something really impactful. So I'm proud to put IBASA behind my name, by the way. So will that be it, Andre? Or is there some final
I think so. So don't forget, for the first 5, we would love to understand who they are in the business advisory space, either BA, PBA, or CBA. Please feel free to join.
Great. Thank you much, everyone. Have a very productive Wednesday afternoon, or if you're a golfer, a good round of golf. I'm not sure if any of us are. I'm not, but I know that some of us are. And those that whose birthday it is, we asked when we started off, I can't remember who it was, but there were a few that identified themselves as birthday people this week, sort of have a great year ahead, a productive one and a rewarding one for yourself. And maybe independent director and helping our clients in understanding the 3 roles they need to play is also part of what you could do. So go out and have an impact. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.